but whenever we were introduced to a bad guy, it just felt like, ugh, tiny bit cringe. The first scene where we get introduced to him didn't really make any sense. I mean, we literally have a scene where a guy is cut in half, Kill Bill in some ways, mixed with Princess Bride. I have never read a manga, and today I'm going to react and kind of review to the first episode in the live adaptation of One Piece, which has literally just dropped on Netflix. I mean, it is literally 8 AM here in the UK. I got up early this morning, or relatively early considering it's my summer break, just so I could watch this, and I'm really excited because I have heard so many great things about this epic series. And you might be wondering, why have I never read a manga? I mean, there's no particular reason. So maybe after having watched the first episode, I will pick up One Piece. We will see. But yeah, I'm really excited to see if I'll understand what is happening, if I'll enjoy the more whimsical tone, because according to the trailer, this looks quite colorful and fun. And then I just really hope that One Piece fans are gonna love what they're seeing, because fandoms really need a win, don't they? But without further ado, I have the episode ready. Let's watch it, and after I watch the first episode, I'll give you my first impressions. Okay, so I literally just finished episode 1, and here are my unfiltered thoughts about the first episode. So firstly, what are my overall thoughts? Did I enjoy this episode? Did I think it was good? Am I gonna continue watching it? And overall, I thought the first episode was reasonably good actually. I had a great time with it. I thought it was a lot of fun. The plot was easy to follow. I thought the visuals was overall very good. And overall, I didn't have any major issues with any of the acting, except when it came to some of the villains and stuff like that, which I'll get into a bit more later on. Now, if you have read One Piece, then I would love to hear your thoughts on the first episode, because as I said, I literally have no idea if this was faithfully adapted or not, if it feels very different in tone, or if it's like quite true to the source material and also definitely let me know if it's true, because as I stated in the beginning of the video, I've never read a manga. Literally I knew nothing about One Piece except that I had heard that the protagonist's name was Luffy, and this was like a pirate theme kind of story, but except for that, I literally knew and I know nothing about One Piece. So let's get a bit more into this review, and I will discuss some parts of the first episodes. If you want to go totally blind into the first episode and not know anything, then please click off now. I mean, it's not going to be majorly spoilery because, as I said, I don't really understand exactly what is happening and so on. But let's start from the beginning, shall we? So I must say that the first 3-4 minutes of the first episodes were probably the strongest of the whole episode, in my opinion. We're instantly told what kind of world we're set in. It's basically a world that has hundreds and hundreds of islands and is mostly covered by sea, and that is a good thing for me, because some of my favorite series like Life Shaped Trilogy and the Tide Shield Trilogy are all nautical fantasy, so I'm a huge fan of those types of worlds, so that is definitely a plus. And also, literally in the first minute of the episodes, we are told that pirates are everywhere, and then we also were introduced to this group called the Marines, which are probably like the government that are trying to like keep order in the society, and basically we get told that the Marines and the pirates, they are not friends, and the Marines basically, they want to destroy the pirates and remove them and hunt them down and so on and so on. And we get this scene that I thought, especially the first scene, was probably my favorite in the whole episode, where we meet this guy called Gold Roger, is that his name? I might get some of the names wrong, so I do apologize about that, but I thought it was just a great setup, going back in time, seeing about this guy that talks about this One Piece that is still out there. He gets killed because he's a pirate, and we just see mass chaos everywhere after he's killed. And the fact that he mentioned that there is this One Piece out there, and then he literally gets killed as a martyr, literally spawns a new age where the pirates almost become stronger than ever. So I think that overall that is a very good setup, and it really opens up your imagination for what can happen in this world. Like, we know nothing about this One Piece except that everyone wants it. We have no idea where it is, and we know that everyone is hunting it. So just the possibilities of the amount of villains we can have in a world like this, and the amount of places I can expect to be introduced in this world, and the locations, so on. It's just like, we know that our protagonist, he wants to find the One Piece, And it just feels like this story can literally become so epic because we have no idea where it is. So I'm expecting Luffy, because I know this is a big series, he'll probably go on a very big adventure and he'll probably visit lots of maybe tens or maybe hundreds of different islands. We'll probably get introduced to lots of villains, lots of different cultures. So I think the overall premise was quite intriguing, and it also is very open-ended, which is probably a good thing for a series like this. And right from the get-go, it almost feels like, yes, there is a One Piece out out there that is important to find, but it really feels like the journey to getting there is gonna be the most important thing about this whole series. And while the One Piece is probably gonna still be a focus, it probably won't be as important as all the missions and stuff like that they're gonna encounter along the way, if that makes any sense. So yeah, the first 2, 3, 4 minutes I thought were quite brilliant. The acting was quite good in my opinion. Visually, it definitely has a specific tone, but it works. So yeah, but then we are introduced to our protagonist. I think he's the protagonist, right? Luffy, who is this very naive kind of guy, or at least initially he seems very naive, and he wants to become the king of the pirates, which I think was the title that Gold Roger, which we were introduced in the very first scene, also called himself. Isn't that correct? And we also get like his backstory about how he's always been obsessed of becoming a pirate. He basically grew up in a family, I think, who were also pirates. And I must say, the first scene where we get introduced to him didn't really make any sense. I mean, he was on a boat. There was a bird there, and I love animals, so hopefully we'll get to see this bird again, or some kind of animals, but then the boat just sinks. We weren't told why, it just sinks. So he escapes into a barrel, and then by being in this barrel, he eventually arrives on this other ship. But I just like, thematically, or like for the tone, it kind of made sense that the boat sank, but why did it sink? I was just a bit confused about that part. And then shortly after, we're introduced to another world building element that I found absolutely fascinating, and that is that the ships in this world are not necessarily all brown and stuff like that, but they are very, very colorful. They look great, they look very fun, and they look massive. I mean, very early on, we see this very big, bright pink kind of ship, and the boss on this ship, or the captain, is a female, which I also thought was quite interesting. So this isn't a world where men necessarily dominate, or like there isn't maybe a patriarchal kind of system in place. So I also found that quite interesting. But before we continue, let me just finish my thoughts about Luffy in this first episode, and whether I think that he seems to be a good protagonist or not. One thing that I thought was brilliantly done is to give the viewers a backstory of why he had these magical abilities, and also just to show that he's always had this obsession of becoming this great pirate. And initially I thought, it makes no sense that he is this confident when he like is faced with like impending danger and a lot of threats and so on. But we're then told that he is actually ridiculously powerful, and he has this stretching kind of ability. Now I think that his magical abilities are very, very cool, but I really hope that there's some way to actually kill him, you know, because minor spoilers here, but he literally gets a bat smacked into his face, and someone also shoots him in the chest, and he's just able to bounce this off without any problems. And while I think that is cool, we don't really want a Superman kind of situation here where he just seems to be too overpowered, if that makes any sense. So hopefully we will see that he does have some weaknesses. I mean, definitely like personality, he does have a weakness because he seems to be overly confident. But I really think it's important that Luffy, he can die if he's captured and someone really wants to kill him or something. So hopefully that is shown later in the episodes. Now another thing I have to mention about Luffy is that his humor didn't really land that well with me in a lot of ways. A lot of the jokes that he says, it almost feels like, I mean, if you're a Brandon Sanderson fan, it feels like a joke Brandon Sanderson would write. I mean, it's quite like clean, if that makes any sense. And it just feels quite, I don't really know how to describe the humor, but it feels like that type of humor I would have laughed at when I was like 13 years old. But we also get to see that Luffy has a soft side, and he actually cares about humans, because my favorite aspect of this whole first episode was Koby, right? That is his name. I apologize if I got his name wrong. This insecure wimp, basically, that has been captured by pirates, and he's fortunately saved by Luffy. But just that relationship from the get-go, where we have a mentor type in Luffy, and then we have Koby, who's a wimp, who's very insecure. I am a huge sucker of a good mentor trope, and this kind of felt like it, except that they seem to be the same kind of age. And I'm also just a huge sucker for an underdog. And just in the first episode, I think that Koby has a pretty great character arc, so I definitely really appreciate that. But yeah, I'm not gonna spoil what happens at the end of the episode, but it's definitely quite interesting that the story decided decided to put Koby in that place where he ends up, because I definitely expected Koby to not go in that direction, but I'm not gonna spoil it. Now, I need to talk about the tone of the first episode, because this feels different from anything I've ever watched before. So on one hand, this first episode was surprisingly brutal and bloody. I mean, we literally have a scene where a guy is cut in half and we see blood and we see everything that's inside just spilled out everywhere, and we have at least 2 or 3 scenes that are very, very brutal. We see blood, it is gory, it is absolutely brutal. So that definitely surprised me, because most of the episodes feel quite like colorful, it feels quite fun, it feels a bit whimsical, and I said like the humor is quite like clean. And so on one hand you have a lot of blood, you have gory, brutal scenes, which I always appreciate, a bit of like realism in my series, but then you also have like this colorful, fun kind of theme going on as well in the same world, which I thought was very, very interesting. It almost felt like Kill Bill in some ways, mixed with Princess Bride. Now, I know that this is a terrible comparison, but you kind of have both of those elements, because also at the end of the first episode, we literally have a scene where 3 people are like fighting against like 30 other people, and they're just like destroying them, which reminded me of Kill Bill. But then you also have like this kind of Princess Bride humor. It is interesting to say the least, but it also makes it a bit hard to place in my head like what I should compare this series to, and maybe this series shouldn't be compared to anything. I mean, it might be a good thing that this just feels quite unique and original. Now let me just talk about the 2 other characters we're introduced into this episode. We have this green-haired guy, Roronoa Zoa. I'm probably butchering that name. Overall, he was probably my least favorite of the main characters in this episode. He definitely seems very powerful, he seems like a badass, and he said he wanted to be, let me just check, he wants to be the greatest swordsman ever, and he calls himself a guy that hunts pirates. So I'm not sure if he's part of the Marines, or maybe he's like lives in the countries or in an area where Marines are in control, and maybe he's more like on the outskirts, maybe a bit of a rebel, but it's not fully a pirate. I'm not really sure, but overall, I mean, emotionally, we do have a scene where he like definitely stands up for justice, which was a bit of character development and growth, but we didn't really see much emotion in his face, if that makes any sense, and he's probably the character I felt the least involved in, but there's definitely time for him to become a really, really great character. Now, the other character that I really enjoyed was this red-haired lady, and I'm not sure if we were ever given a proper name for her in the first episode. Like, I really tried to listen, and she definitely has some screen time, but I'm not really sure if she ever told us what her name was. But I am a huge, huge sucker for like a good thief that is able to outsmart everyone, and she just seems so cunning, she seems so clever, and if I had to rank my favorite characters, it probably had to be Koby, then the red-haired lady, then Luffy, and then probably the green-haired guy. I mean, this is only the first episode, so the fact that we're introduced to 4 different characters and all of them have relatively growth in the first episode is definitely a good sign. Now, another thing I have to talk about is the pacing. I felt overall that the pacing was near spot on. Like, there is so much action, and again, I have talked about the beginning of the episode, but within the first 6 or 7 minutes, we literally have like 2 major fights, and from there on, it is almost just constant. And we do have a couple of slow moments, but they're not long, and it's just constant like intrigue, and the plot just constantly moves forward. And that also again makes me wonder like how faithful is this to the manga, because it feels like they must have moved some things around to make the pacing this fast, if that makes any sense. Like in the manga, do all of these things really happen this quickly? Because in the first episode alone, I think we have like 3 like minor conflicts or like action scenes and stuff like that are being like resolved, which feels like a lot for an 1-hour episode, but it makes the viewing experience quite enjoyable. But yeah, I'm not sure if it's faithful to the manga, so yeah, definitely let me know about that one. And the last thing I wanted to mention before I wrap up my thoughts and let you know if I am planning on continuing this series is that I noticed that when they are in bars, the bars have neon lights behind them, but there's not really a hint that electricity or steampunk inventions and so on are a part of this world. So I'm definitely intrigued, like, is this kind of a steampunk kind of world, or does this world have more like advanced technology or not? It definitely felt weird seeing like the setting where you have definitely like a traditional pirate bar with neon lights. So I definitely thought that was interesting. Oh, another thing I have to mention, and this is my biggest criticism with the first episode, is that I thought like the dialogue overall was pretty good, but whenever the villains talked, it just felt a bit cringy and also just a bit over the top, if that makes any sense. It almost felt like the villains felt like they came out of an animation movie or a cartoon, which, I mean, I know it is from a manga, but now we're doing a real life adaptation. And yeah, for some reason, I just felt the villains felt quite cringy, even at the very end where we also see this other pirate, which is apparently like probably an iconic pirate, I'm sure. It also felt like a bit over the top and cringy. I mean, if you're a fan of One Piece, let me know if this like correlates to the series and if it makes sense that they are over the top and stuff like that. But in my opinion, like Luffy, the green-haired guy, and Koby and so on, I didn't really have any issues with the dialogue, but whenever we were introduced to a bad guy, it just felt like, ugh, tiny bit cringe. I don't know. Okay, but what are my overall thoughts about the first episode? Well, this world seems to be very, very intriguing. It feels vast, it feels epic, and there feels like there's so much potential in this world. Actually, this world felt so exciting that even when I was watching the first episode, I was kind of like, I kind of maybe want to give the first manga a read to see if I'll enjoy it, because there seems to be so much potential here. The second thing is, this world feels unique, it feels fresh, and the third thing is that I think the characterizations was overall quite good. The set looked good, the acting was relatively good, and the pacing was spot on. And as I already mentioned, my only real criticisms here were that the villains felt quite cringy in my opinion. And one thing that this episode does really well is to set up a found family trope, and I love when a fantasy has found family. It's one of my favorite tropes, which is also a reason why I was a bit sad about how the first episode ended, if you know what I mean. What I really think that this series now needs is a good animal companion to really make the found family trope come together and make it like epic. Now, will I be continuing this series? Well, I think I'll definitely watch episode 2. I mean, as I said, I don't really have any major issues with the first episode, but there's just something about the atmosphere and tone that makes me wonder if I'll actually really enjoy the adaptation. I mean, it's fun, it's action-paced, it's well-paced, but there's just something about the tone that feels quite whimsical, it feels like quite lighthearted, even though it's also gory and bloody, and I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to get fully invested in this world because of that reason, but I will be watching episode 2, and for the first episode I'll probably give it 3.5 out of 5 stars maybe. It's definitely not a bad first episode, and as I said, if you're a fan of One Piece, definitely know if this is even close to being a good adaptation of the source material or not. But yeah, this was my first introduction to the massive series One Piece, and overall, the first episode wasn't bad. Definitely let me know if you want me to react to episode 2. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some inspiration to read more books. Now, if you want to support me in any way, then you can check out my Patreon. I have different tiers and you'll get different benefits depending on what tier you support. Some of the benefits include getting your name in my videos, voting rights on my next feed, getting a special role on my Discord server, getting access to one Patreon exclusive video a month, or even art cards and bookmarks signed by my wife and me. Most of the money goes to hiring an editor to do a couple of videos for me a month, which basically allows me to post high quality content more frequently. But yeah, thank you so much for watching and God bless.